Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole. This is another one of our weekly congressional chats. Congress has actually been pretty busy lately and actually doing its work, and I think to some effect. Those of you that follow not only these discussions, but much more importantly, current events, know that a couple of weeks ago, we passed a debt ceiling increase bill that was combined with spending reforms and reductions and some important policy matters like H.R. 1, which is a bill designed to stimulate American energy production, permitting reform, different things like that, work requirements on welfare. It's actually a very good bill and a very good effort, and so the House has now raised the debt ceiling. You'll hear a lot of cries and complaints from Democrats, but the reality is, the Senate has yet to pass a bill that raises the debt ceiling. The president's demanding what he calls a clean debt ceiling increase, that is raising the debt ceiling without any reforms at all or any changes in spending priorities. That's simply not going to happen because that can't pass. If it can't pass in a Democratic Senate, it certainly won't pass in a Republican House. So the president, delayed things for quite a while. There was a meeting on this 3 months ago. He waited actually longer than that, 97 days, before there was a second meeting to discuss this after the Republicans had passed their bill. He's not yet moved positions. There's a meeting on this at the White House on Friday. There's a staff meeting Wednesday and Thursday in preparation. But it's the president that has created the crisis by simply waiting too long to sit down and negotiate. Again, Republicans in the House have acted. They've raised the debt ceiling and said, here's the spending cuts in the same bill. Here's the reforms that we think will make the economy more productive. That's going to dominate the headlines going forward. And the second major effort, Republicans delivered on another promise they made, and that's passed border security legislation. It's no secret that the southern border of the United States is a disaster area right now. Since President Biden took office, over 5 million illegal entrants have been apprehended. Over 1 million more are unapprehended getaways. So this is just an unbelievable crisis. The number of Americans dying of drugs coming across the border, particularly fentanyl, has shot through the roof. It's over 100,000 a year now. The human trafficking toll, that is literally people sold into slavery, sometimes for work, sometimes, quite frankly, for sexual exploitation, is at record levels. The administration itself has admitted it's lost track of 85,000 of the unaccompanied children that it simply turned over to people. Now they can't reestablish contact, so we don't know what's happened to those kids. It's a disaster. And this Congress is going to at least move legislation through the House to do something about it. The legislation that we moved will allow us to build 900 miles more of border wall, will allow us to increase the number of Border Patrol agents that we have. It will not only increase the numbers, it'll give those folks a bonus. They're working very, very hard under very difficult circumstances. We will also reinstate some of the policies of the last administration that worked, particularly the Remain in Mexico policy. That is, if you're applying for asylum, that's perfectly fine. You can do it, but you have to do it at a legal point of entry, and you have to wait in Mexico until your claim is adjudicated, and we know we're eligible. And the reality is, only about 10% of the people that claim asylum qualify for asylum. And once it goes to court, in almost 90% of the cases, the individual requesting asylum really isn't eligible. They may want to come here because it's better work opportunities. They may want to come here to reunite families. Certainly those things are fine. Some of them, sadly, are going to be coming in because they're carrying drugs. Others are going to be coming in with criminal intent and involved in human trafficking. But the point is, you need to come here legally within the law. You don't have the right just to walk across the American border and immediately be taken to wherever you want to go and be eligible for support and benefits. But that's been the Biden policy, and that's why our southern border is being overrun. The number of people coming across is again exponentially up. It's thousands a day. And now the Title 42, which allowed us to expel migrants, illegal immigrants, I should say, um, in a public health emergency like COVID, that's running out. And what we're seeing is an even greater increase because we no longer have that tool to send people back. All we're saying in this legislation is we should treat anybody that arrives on our border, including unaccompanied minors, the way we treat Mexican and Canadian kids that come here. We immediately return them to their parents. You're not allowed to just come into the country. And if you're adults, obviously, the same thing should apply to you. You can wait in Mexico. If you've got an asylum claim, you can make that claim at an American embassy, if you live outside of Mexico. But that's the point. You wait there. You don't come here. So this is a bill that is long overdue. Nobody has passed a border security measure through Congress since the 1990s. That seems unbelievable, but it's true, because it's such a difficult area to legislate in and it's so emotional. But Republicans in the House said if we're given the opportunity to govern, we're going to produce legislation that will secure the border. Then we can talk about immigration reform. But the first thing we're going to do is produce legislation that would secure the border. The bill we're passing, H.R. 2, will do just that. And I'm very proud to be associated with it. I'm very proud of this conference for coming together and finding a way to move forward and do something effective. Now it'll be up to the Democrats in the Senate. Are they willing to do anything? It'll be up to the administration. Is it willing to change its policy? The Secretary for Homeland Security in President Obama's administration, Jay Johnson, actually made the point that if we have more than 1,000 illegal immigrants a day crossing the border, that's a crisis. We have 5, 7, 10,000 people a day coming across every single day. And it's a direct result of President Biden's policy. He deliberately undid everything President Trump did. You can like or not like President Trump, but you can't dispute the fact he was a lot more effective at securing the border than this administration's done. And they should have left what was there in place and added to it. Instead, they destroyed it. And again, we have a deluge of drugs, we have an epidemic of human trafficking, and we have millions of people taking advantage of a porous southern border and violating our laws. And that just simply can't be allowed to continue. I'm proud that we're doing something about it. Another thing that we're doing something about this week is we're passing legislation to help combat the fraud that took place during COVID. Look, during COVID, a lot of people received unemployment benefits and they deserved them. The government shut down the economy out of the health measure. Given that, you're eligible for benefits, and the millions of Americans legitimately collected those benefits. Unfortunately, when you do that, there are people that commit fraud. And we're not sure how much it was committed. The estimates range any place from a low of $60 billion out of the over $800 billion that was distributed to as much as $400 billion. Probably the most reliable figure is in the $200 billion range. But in whatever case, a lot of money was stolen by people that were not legitimately using. They were claiming benefits they weren't eligible for. They continued to work or didn't work and weren't eligible for unemployment payment. But the point is, we want to get that money back for the American taxpayer. So what Congress has done is passed, unemployment is paid out by the states. A lot of that money is, some of it's state money, a lot of it's federal money. We've empowered the states to go recapture the money. And if they do, they get to keep 25% of whatever comes back to them that's been taken illegally. That seems a pretty sensible way to fund it. And it became a very partisan issue in Congress. And that's sad because we all ought to want to make sure that we crack down on fraud. Now, there's some charges that, oh my gosh, if there was an accidental overpayment, you're going to have to send it back, and people can't afford that. That's nonsense. The law is very specific. You have to have committed fraud money that's recovered, it can only be money that was fraudulently taken in the first place. So we think that's a pretty good piece of legislation, and we'll see what the Democrats do with it going forward. Let me finally mention the normal appropriations process that I'm pretty heavily involved in is underway. That is, the committees, the 12 subcommittees on appropriations that actually fund the government have finished their hearings for the year. And they're now beginning to write the bills. So what's happening now behind closed doors is the chairman of each of those 12 subcommittees. I chair the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Subcommittee, a jurisdiction of about $90 billion, are now making decisions and putting together what are called chairman's mark. That is the initial version of the bill. That chairman mark then goes to the subcommittee and ultimately to the committee and is revised through amendment, discussion, debate, and those become the House bills. The Senate is supposed to do the same thing. They haven't for 2 years. Hopefully they will this year. And then we sit down and reconcile and debate those two versions and come up with a single version, come to agreement, pass it through both houses, and send it on to the president. So that process is underway. Again, the early stages now, the bill drafting is what's going on. But you'll see bills within the next couple of weeks coming up in appropriations, full committee as it's called. They'll go through the subcommittees, and then they're reported to the full committee, and there'll be a major debate. Then it'll be up to Republican leadership in the House when and what bills are put on the floor and in what order they're put there. But that process is moving along, and I have no doubt that every bill will pass at least through committee. And then at that point, if it goes to the floor, hopefully it'll pass. If it doesn't, you at least have what's called a conferenceable bill, where you can sit down with the Senate and actually negotiate any bill that has come out of committee into a common version. So again, a lot of hard work, not very glamorous, but it's what funds the government. And you're going to see Republicans trying to cut back on some of this reckless spending that we've seen during the Biden administration and during the 2 years where only Democrats made the decision. So it was a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and they pretty much controlled the appropriations process. That's not true anymore. Republican views and priorities have to be taken into consideration. So again, this has been Congress hard at work. A debt ceiling bill raised a couple of weeks ago, or passed a couple of weeks ago. This week, border security and the ongoing appropriations process now well underway. So I look forward to chatting with you next week and visiting with you. Hopefully the president and Democrats in the Senate will get serious and join us in raising the debt ceiling, something, again, House Republicans have already passed, along with some spending rescissions and cuts and adjustments. It's now up to the Democrats in the Senate to either pass something or sit down and talk to the Republicans, both in the Senate and here. And more importantly, it's up to the president to lead. He's got to stop simply demanding what he can't get. This idea he's going to get a clean debt ceiling increase, you can't pass that through the Democratic Senate. They don't have the votes to do it. There are even Democrats that are against it. You certainly can't pass it through a Republican House. So, Mr. President, quit gallivanting around the globe and sit down with Kevin McCarthy and his Democratic counterpart, Leader Jeffries, in the House, and also with Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Minority Leader McConnell in the Senate, and hash out a deal. This is what you're supposed to be really good at. This is what you're supposed to be famous for. And honestly, this is what you've done in the past. When you were a United States Senator, when you were Vice President, you sat down and dealt on these issues. We would hope that you do that again. But time's running out, and sadly, if we run into a default, it'll be because the President of the United States did not do his job. It won't be because legislation didn't pass the Republican House. It's already passed the Republican House. Now it's up to the Democratic Senate and the Democratic President to either pass a clean bill, and they can come to conference with that, or pass something and come to conference, and we'll sit down. And we've got our negotiating position. We've passed it through the House. That's what we're supposed to do. Up to the president now and his Democratic friends in the United States Senate, where they are in control, to do exactly the same thing. With that, I look forward to talking to you next week. There'll be a lot of ongoing drama, I'm sure, but just remember, the Republican House did its job on the debt ceiling, did its job on the southern border, and is doing its job on the appropriations process right now. So good luck, God bless, look forward to visiting with you next week.